Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, November 12th, 2020. I want to put the emphasis on all of that. It's not particularly important, but okay. Here we are, Thursday, November 12th. Time for another show. Greg Dworkin already amassing a raft of stories to share with you. Many things to catch up on. I don't know. It feels like heading into the weekend here. I'm wondering what the president is going to be doing during this weekend. I don't think the weather is going to be golf weather here in Virginia, though I guess you could get away with it. It'll be a little chilly. So I'm wondering how he'll spend his weekend. It won't be, presidenting or anything like that. I guess focus shifts now to his continued insistence that the transition not begin and the impact that may likely have on our eventual recovery from the pandemic. As you know, it's been my belief all along that we won't be able to escape from under the cloud of this pandemic in the United States, I think probably while Donald Trump is still alive. I don't know. And he may have 20 years left in him. Who knows? I don't think the pandemic can quite last that long. He can't make it last any longer. But I think the next couple of years, even with him out of office and supposedly out of power, I think he'll be doing an awful lot to drive the narrative that there's either nothing that can or should be done about the thing. I guess, he loves playing the oldies. So even out of office, he'll be insisting that if you were ever really, truly a MAGA supporter, you still shouldn't wear a mask. And, he's been anti-vax in his career as well. So we have a vaccine, a promising vaccine candidate that might be, supposedly, you hope that if everything goes right, you can start administering this thing to people at some point next year. But it's a tremendously complicated logistical undertaking, as Greg has explained to us before. And if you do the wrong thing, even if it's not a vaccine, you do the wrong thing with distribution, you can end up, one, not getting a whole lot of this modern medical miracle to anyone at all, or two, having lots of it essentially rot on the docks and go bad without ever being used by anyone. The cautionary tale of the distribution of Tamiflu is hanging out there. This one appears to be even more complicated because, of course, you'll need to, I guess, eventually vaccinate everyone in America, or nearly everyone in America. And our vaccination rate hasn't been all that great for anything for the last couple of years because there's a significant, portion of the population, significant enough that we find that there are occasionally comebacks of diseases previously regarded as more or less eradicated in the United States because people get it in their heads that the information that they're reading on whatever website they might be spending all their time on is that vaccines are bad for you. And of course, that's not actually true, but it's caused a tremendous problem. This vaccine by itself, one, we need to get it to everybody in America, and that's 330 million people plus. It may be that you need 2 doses of it. Who knows? We may even need more of it. So 660 million doses have to be produced. That's actually not as big a challenge for this particular kind of vaccine, I don't think, as is the case with some others. I think, as Greg was explaining the other day, it can be a relatively simple process just because of the way they made it in the first place. But now I understand the vaccine may need to be stored in some extremely cold temperatures that ordinary refrigerators and freezers that a lot of rural hospitals have on hand aren't actually capable of producing. I read that one. We can share that news. Then who knows how long it takes to ramp up production. Are we up to speed on the glass vials that will contain the vaccine? How many of these freezers do we even have, even if rural hospitals could afford them? A lot of problems, a lot of questions that only a competent administration really could even possibly begin to approach. And we haven't got one of those. And the one thing that they are doing is preventing the competent administration in the wings from actually hitting the ground running. So we could be here for a while. Greg's here right now, so we'll just switch gears and maybe not topics, but good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, good morning. So, yeah, it's tough. The cold part of it, having to keep it cold is a big deal.
Yes.
And then
it seems true.
It's likely as part, and there's a little confusion about this, but there shouldn't be. Pfizer was not funded by Operation Warp Speed, but participated with Operation Warp Speed in the sense that the Warp Speed thing was responsible for guaranteeing pre-purchase so that they knew they had some funds to work with as they did their development.
I think I get
that.
But
because there's a pre-purchase by the government, it ought not to be sold to you.
Yes.
So the price for the consumer should be relatively low to zero, not necessarily zero because there's always administrative fees. You got to pay the nurse to do the shot, and the swab, the alcohol wipe, the Band-Aid, all that stuff. And that usually goes for like $15, $20, typically in a doctor's office. So that administrative fee may in fact be picked up by health insurance, and if you don't have health insurance, it might be waived. So the cost to the consumer should be relatively low. The problem is getting enough doses everywhere, and if the rural hospitals aren't ready to do it, they'll need FEMA or some other help from the federal government as part of the disaster, protocol.
Right.
Because there's a national disaster framework for things like this where all the different agencies get involved in a competent administration, of which this isn't, but, we're getting one. And Ron Klain, who will be the vice president's chief of staff, is extremely familiar with all of this, having done it before. So, he ought to be able to hit the ground running and get some of this stuff done.
Yes, well, that would be good. That was good news yesterday, too.
It was part of the good news.
Getting out of the pandemic news, anyway. Also, now there was a point at which Trump insisted that he was going to somehow use the military for distribution of the vaccine, and I think he fired everybody in the military yesterday.
Yeah, well, a
civilian
bunch of
control
news stories certainly came out yesterday. AP tried to sum them up, that Biden tapped Ron Klain is of political interest.
Yes.
We have stories from the AP about Trump voters being dismayed how both the recent hurricanes and the election have put their owned show chickens in disarray. I mean, there's a story about that. And we have legal challenges. What's interesting is, as Kyle Griffin points out, the largest law firm representing the Trump campaign or its allies in post-election litigation challenging votes in key states has withdrawn from an election lawsuit in Maricopa County, Arizona. I think they've withdrawn in Nevada. In Michigan, the case they put up was so stupid, it looked like it was written by Rudy Giuliani. Basically, I think we talked about this on the show yesterday. Their reams of paper documentation of election fraud had to do with being mean to observers who weren't poll watchers, because there's a difference, and poll watchers who weren't observers, and being asked to stay 6 feet away, and election officials getting rude when they tried to, circumvent that because they couldn't see.
Yes.
So, in other words, nothing there. So as the law suits fade away, it gives way to political recalcitrance fading away. I mentioned Ron Klain was named as Biden's chief of staff.
Right.
And here's some of the reaction to that, which I think was kind of interesting. I mean, you could ask yourself the question,
anyway. Yes.
What do Robert Jeffress and Hugh Hewitt and Geraldo Rivera and Jim Lankford, what do they all have in common? Well, they all know Biden won.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
Right? I mean, it's pretty interesting. Biden finally won Arizona. Decision Desk called it.
Yeah, reverse yourself.
After the votes didn't come in. Decision Desk called Pennsylvania early. Decision Desk has actually been far more responsible than most of the networks, which is really kind of interesting in regard to that.
Let's make it a network.
But what we have is Karl Rove writing in the Wall Street Journal, the presidential election won't be overturned. I gave you the CNN version because the Wall Street Journal is behind a paywall.
Right. That won't be overturned either.
But Karl Rove, the architect of former President George W. Bush's gubernatorial and presidential campaigns, and I would add, and who knows something about stealing elections, acknowledged Wednesday that the 2020 presidential election will not be overturned regardless of the flurry of lawsuits. Rove wrote in a Wall Street Journal op-ed that while the president's within his rights to challenge the results, his efforts are unlikely to move a single state.
Yeah.
Okay. Dallas Morning News says Dallas Robert Jeffress, leading pro-Trump evangelical conservative, calls Biden president-elect, but says it's not official yet. It's a bitter pill, but Christians are not hypocrites and must accept rightful leadership once it's certified, he says.
Okay.
Hugh Hewitt, the estimable Ronald Klain is a terrific choice by the president-elect. Notice those words.
Right.
He's been a serious student of the risk of pandemic for a long time. And then we have Jim Langford saying a Republican senator against CNN says he will step in if Biden doesn't have access to intelligence briefings by Friday.
Tomorrow.
So you have basically certain of the Republicans being spokespeople, mouthpieces, conduits, however you want to put it, or others, for example, Pat Toomey saying basically the Pennsylvania election seems to be free and fair, and I don't have a problem with this. And he's not running for re-election, so he gets to say stuff like that. Mitt Romney gets to say whatever he wants because he's Mitt Romney in a safe state for him.
Yeah.
And they've both acknowledged that Biden won. They're probably speaking for the whole rest of the Senate, who's just needs another day or two to get, Trump on board and or at least figure out how they're going to approach this.
Senators may be too emotional to run
through the polling,
office.
And get a sense of the focus groups and how you do this. Geraldo Rivera, whose tweets are now restricted, but at least there's a Business Insider story that covers it. Wrote on Twitter, "Dear real Donald Trump, my honored friend, you fought an incredible battle versus all odds in the curse of insidious disease. You battled the backstabbers and our enemies and remade the world in peace and prosperity. You came so close. Time coming soon to say goodbye with grace and dignity." That last line obviously is important stuff.
Yes.
You got to suck up to him to get him to read the whole thing.
Right. You're great.
Rivera tried to reach out to Trump on social media, whereas other Fox News staff have taken different approaches. Basically you have to say it on the news to get him to see it. You have to go on Fox and Friends and say, "I think you lost," because that's the only way he's going to hear it, because everybody around him is too afraid to tell him.
Yeah.
But, fact is, in 69 days he's out.
That's good. Nice.
Right? Nothing's going to happen. Nearly 80% of Americans say Biden won White House, ignoring Trump's refusal to concede, says a Reuters Ipsos poll. That's more than half of Republicans.
A poll?
And just about all the Democrats.
So like 70%.
This is inevitable. It's inexorable. He's losing. He's leaving. This isn't a coup. It's stupid. There's harm and damage being done. But, it's not like he's sticking around.
Okay. Well, I'm giving everybody a helpful tool. Polls say 80% of Americans believe Biden won. So that means 70% of Americans believe Biden won.
Yeah, give or take plus or minus 35. Whatever you want to do with it. The resentment against polls is real, probably overblown, but, issues polling is always better than horse race polling anyway. And, the fact of the matter is that people are getting used to the fact that Trump has lost. Now, that's where the show chickens come in.
Show chickens.
The show chickens.
What?
Right? There's this AP story. Let me read it to you here. Grief, anger, disbelief, Trump voters face Biden's victory. Yes, I know. Yet another Trump voter thing. You're all sick of it. We do need to have some Biden voters elated, then dismayed by how long it takes to count. We need those.
None of them will eat inside a diner.
The black women who helped to lead the Biden victory. We have one of those from USA Today.
Oh.
But this one talks, well, let me just read it to you. When Joan Martin in St. Petersburg, Florida. When Joan Martin heard that Joe Biden had been declared the winner of the presidential election, the retired nurse and avowed supporter of President Donald Trump was deeply unsettled. To steel herself, she thought about how her household weathered Hurricane Katrina when it battered her hometown of Picayune, Mississippi in 2005.
Huh. Okay.
As the storm blew toward the town, Martin rushed out in her yard to carry her 85 show chickens to safety.
What?
Outside, howling winds slashed her family's barn, lifting the edges of the roof off its moorings. The next day, the chickens were very concerned, but then they settled in, so I have to follow their lead.
You know what? Sure.
And if that takes you to where you need to go, I'm all for show chickens.
I guess so. Wow. All right. Do they poll these chickens?
I have some great pictures of show chickens, too. Not in the article, but I went and found them on the internet, and they're just fantastic. So once the virus is gone and we have the opportunity to go back to those agricultural fairs, state fairs and local fairs,
right.
there's
Unless
some
there's bird
fantastic
flu.
chickens to look at.
Yeah.
But that's for now.
Paying new attention to it. Okay. Well, all right. That's a story that happened to a person.
Right, exactly. So
it's merely anecdotal. There were, it wasn't just one chicken. It was 70 something of them. Right? Well, how many chickens did they say?
85 show chickens.
So wow, it's a statistically relevant sample as show chickens go. I wouldn't say necessarily humans.
Let me give you some of my favorite pictures, just because it's worth taking a peek at.
Is she dressed up in a chicken suit at any point in any of this?
Yes. I'm giving you. It's a lovely white chicken with a little camo suit.
A hand-knitted sweater vest in camouflage.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It's not this kind of thing you see every day. And this,
no days.
Looks like a rooster, and not a rooster you'd want to mess with either.
Let's see this. Holy mackerel. All right.
So, they're pretty spectacular birds as far as that goes. But, more important are their owners and how they get used to the fact. It takes a couple of days. We've been there. We've had losses. We know what it feels like. A little compassion wouldn't kill you. The virus will.
Yeah. Yes, right.
But compassion
Bird
will.
flu, too. That could get in the way of the next show.
Yeah, it could.
Also, why didn't she listen to the
And
weather?
then there's also these other little bright spots. Let me give you one from Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay, I'm just going to question.
Joe Biden got 55.7% of the vote in Jefferson County, Alabama, the Birmingham area.
Birmingham. How much
Trump's
percent?
42. So 55.7 to 42.6.
All right.
No Democratic presidential candidate has won the county by double digits since 1944.
Wow.
When Alabama was a one-party state and FDR got 80% of the vote.
Okay.
Because in 2000, Bush won 51 to 47 over Al Gore. In 2004, Bush beat Kerry 54-45. In 2008 and 2012, Obama took the area, and so it started to be a little bit more democratic, as many urban areas started to be, but only by a small amount, by about 4 or 5 points. In 2016, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump in this area 52 to 44. Okay, not quite making double digits, but this year it was 56 to 45.
Okay.
So making inroads everywhere. Don't forget, Biden's going to have something like 6 million plus, maybe 7 million votes more than Trump.
Yeah.
He's going to have flipped 5 states. He's going to get 306 electoral votes. And that's pretty good win. He didn't have coattails. That was a problem.
Yes.
And, we still have to dissect. We started yesterday. We didn't start yesterday, but we took a step yesterday in looking at the Latino vote. But keep in mind, there's 2 big things that may have had a lot to do with what happened in the senatorial election. And that's important because we do have those Georgia runoffs coming up.
Yes.
Number one is the decision on the part of Democrats to not do in-your-face canvassing, which may have been a bad idea, and that may be corrected. And number 2, there were a goodly number, as there often are, of votes for Biden, but nobody down ballot.
That happens a lot.
It does happen a lot. But, the argument is that with a lot of those,
try not to have it happen.
It may well have been that the Democrats succeeded in making this a referendum about Donald Trump.
Well, yeah.
choice, Trump or Biden. They picked Biden. They didn't pay attention to anything else, but they picked those people. Now we have to make sure that they pay attention to everything else.
Yeah. Yes. Starting now. And they won't have the opportunity not to in these special
And
elections.
so in the minutes, and this may be a short segment today. I don't have a tremendous amount of information to give you, but at least take us to the half hour.
All right.
And, let me give you this absolutely, to me, fascinating. You all might be bored with it. But this is a focus group. I love watching these focus groups because they're like, what?
Okay.
Okay. This is a focus group of people who were planning on voting for Biden.
Okay.
And in the last couple of weeks, in the last 2 weeks, decided to vote for Trump.
That's a bad plan.
And you listen to them and hear what they say and see if there are things you can learn. And, of course, a lot of it is going to say, what? Where are the show chickens, at least?
Right.
At least the other one had show chickens. What has this got? Okay. So a fellow named Danny Barefoot.
Barefoot?
That's his name. Is writing about this. We're getting started with our focus group. Follow along on this thread.
Oh, okay.
We're opening with COVID and the economy. Remember, these are Biden who switched to Trump at the last minute voters.
Yeah.
Every participant here supports a mask mandate.
Okay.
Half said they were worried about new lockdowns under Biden. I can't do March and April again, said one mother of three.
Yes, you can. But
now, you may have to,
right,
but you don't want to.
No.
So that already has given you a clue as to how the virus played out in a complicated way when it comes to trying to decide who to vote. Yeah. I know it's terrible. I know we need to do stuff. I don't want to.
Yeah, well, right.
And the other guy says we don't have to.
Yeah, so it might be for him. Right. All right, that's great.
80% of the people here said they have more personal savings now than they did at the start of COVID. It's an interesting dynamic of the pandemic. If you didn't lose your job, if you're not taking vacation, you're eating out less, you don't commute, it may actually have left you with more money in your pocket.
This is true if you didn't lose your job. Yeah, that's the
right. If you didn't lose your job, you might actually be in slightly better. So when people say, "Are you better off now than you were?" No. Well, sort of.
Yeah, you can't go outside and
on these expensive New York City $12 coffees.
Right.
We ask if participants approve of Trump's handling of the pandemic. 70% say they disapprove.
Yeah.
One woman notes that while Trump effed this up, she also isn't going to let Biden or anyone else tell me I can't have dinner with my friends. I mean, got to soak this in.
Your friends.
This again, we've talked about this on the show. People don't vote logically based on the issues.
No.
They vote on this issue, but also bananas and then chocolate and also the color red, and then that's how I cast my vote.
I guess so.
Right? And there's a great example of this.
Okay.
Don't want to do the right thing even if they know it is the right thing. If it's difficult, you just, voters don't want to.
Yeah.
And if somebody's out there conning them and lying that they have a better, simpler way that won't work, it's alluring. It's attractive. There's a siren call out there, and some people heed it. So every person here says they have seen small groups of people indoors without masks, either friends or extended family. And almost all the groups say Biden would better manage the pandemic. One woman chimes in, but I think a vaccine is coming soon, and there's lots of things I don't like about how either one of them does. Okay. And a lot of them nod their heads. So, look, Trump screwed up, they're saying. Biden clearly would be better, but he's asking us to do hard stuff, and besides, what difference does it make?
All the mistakes have been made, so at this point...
Mistakes have been made already. Let's just move on.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's pretty good logic. I don't know.
But people like this. This is not, out of the realm of, right? It seems obvious to me like COVID was a net political positive for Biden, says the Danny Barefoot fellow. But maybe just less cut and dry than we initially thought. Some people agree with him, but didn't prioritize it when voting. This is the important thing. Other like this take more than Trump's, but we're still nervous about more lockdowns. And I go back to that Wall Street Journal we were talking about with Denise Oliver Velas on yesterday's excellent show, and she talked to us about the complexity of Latino voting. And we were looking at the Rio Grande Valley.
Yeah, right.
There was a Wall Street Journal also behind the paywall that talked about how Latinos down in the Rio Grande Valley voted.
Yes.
And there were some interesting little tidbits in there. For example, all right,
Yeah.
environmental, approaches and policy, Trump versus Biden.
Okay.
Law and order, Trump versus Biden. Turns out in at least one of those towns, all of the jobs are either the oil business or the sheriff's office.
True. Okay. I can see that being the case.
So, environmental stuff doesn't mean much here. Oil jobs means that we got 18% unemployment here. So, I mean, it's pretty clear.
Yeah. All right. So that explains.
Okay. On to Hunter Biden.
Oh.
Every participant here says they heard about the Hunter story. Every person except for one, the one white man in the group, said the story wasn't concerning.
Okay.
One woman chimes in, I don't think the Biden kids could be worse than the Trump kids if they tried. Yeah. We ask if anybody changed their vote. Nope.
All right.
No difference.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Hunter Biden thing was clearly a failure.
Okay.
Pandemic is complicated. Hunter Biden a failure. All right. We'll do some of this after the break. It's coming up. 70% of the people here say they think Biden mostly disagrees with AOC. Nobody says her influence on the party was important to them flipping their vote.
Okay. All right.
Good.
I was told that was terrible.
Yeah, well, it doesn't make any difference. Over 50% of the people here support more government intervention in healthcare. Over 70% support affordable care. Roe v. Wade, 70% don't think Roe or ACA is likely to be overturned by the courts. They may well be right about ACA from what we've learned.
Yes. Shoot. Well, okay. Let's see. We do have, we'll kill a couple more seconds here as the music swells to a sort of a crescendo and hands us out into the break. Yeah, very interesting that, both Hunter Biden and the AOC, I don't know what you would call it, kerfuffle.
Made no difference. But we have to talk about Roe v. Wade and ACA.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue with the wild story of Danny Barefoot and his traveling, I don't know if they
focus
traveled.
group. Yeah, it's great because it gives you an idea of how real people react to the news here. It turns out the pandemic is complicated in a lot of ways, which we've hinted at, we've discussed. We still need more information on it. Yes, polling's going to help us to get there. But, it's complicated in ways that one may not have anticipated. And the fact of the matter is, as we originally, I don't need to paint you with this broad brush here, so you don't have to be responsible for what I said. But, I thought it likely that whereas people understood the depth and difficulty of the pandemic, they just really didn't want to go back to locking down. They saw mass protests and said, how come they get to do it, we don't get to do it? And so it's complicated, and it didn't automatically wound up helping Biden in a way that I'm afraid the next couple of months are going to, because the next couple of months are going to be bad, like exponentially worse, and that's not just a phrase. But getting back to this focus group, the pandemic results on the election were complicated. Hunter Biden made no difference at all. Trying to tie the Democratic Party to AOC made no difference whatsoever. But this is interesting.
Yes.
80% say racism exists in the criminal justice system. Success in messaging.
Okay.
60% have a favorable view of Black Lives Matter. Suggests success in messaging.
Yes.
These people voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, so not so much
Okay,
success.
and just
there.
park that thought. They agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. I agree with Biden. I'm voting for Trump. Just park that somewhere for a moment because we're going to get back to that.
I guess one other possibility. I agree that there's racism in the criminal justice system, and I'm voting for more of it.
Well, but here's the next part.
Yeah, all right.
Only one participant here agrees we should defund the police. One
Uh-huh.
woman says that's crazier than anything Trump has ever said. 50% of people here say they think Biden was privately sympathetic to the position. We're explaining the actual policies behind defunding the police, and one woman interrupts me. This is Danny trying to explain what defund the police means. That's not what defund the police means. I'm sorry. It means they wanted to fund the police. I don't like being lied to about this over and over again.
This one incenses her. Okay.
Don't try and tell the word doesn't mean what they say. And the rest of the group is nodding their heads. So we ask if they support reducing police funding, reallocating it to social services and other agencies to reduce police presence in community complexes to go to the end. 70% say they support the proposal, but not defunding the police.
Well, right,
and don't
but
tell me
that's
you
not-
don't support it and don't tell me those words don't mean what they say when they mean. And this is one of the reasons we were so aggravated. I was so aggravated when the slogan came out. It's a bad slogan. It's going to lose you votes. You
I don't know if it
can't
was a
explain
slogan,
it.
though. But yeah, I mean, you can't
move
but
it.
Neither can you march in the streets and say, what do they say here? Reduce police funding and reallocate it to social services and other agencies to reduce police presence and community conflict.
So
and when do we want
police.
it?
Come up with a different slogan, but don't tell
Sure.
me this is a political winner.
Well, I don't know if anybody did. I think it was just sort of like we're having a protest. Somebody said, you know what we should do? We should defund the police. Well, that's three
But
words.
here's
I
the
can say
disconnect
that.
between the activists who are working on this, who are absolutely correct in the need for reform, and the political people who are trying to get this done. You cannot get policy without doing politics. You cannot get the policy changed until you elect the political people who
Well,
will
I'm
do
just-
it.
yeah.
We had this problem with Occupy.
Yeah.
You can't just step back and say, well, I don't do politics. I'm just doing this because it's pure. Because the end result is going to be the rest of the country is going to look at you and say, I don't want this.
Yeah, but look
and
at
then
who.
you can't have it. And how does that help anybody?
I don't know. And what do
That's the
I call?
aggra-
Well, I understand the aggravation, but reducing it to action again and making you do something concrete. Do I call 1-800-2-DEFUND and complain to the CEO of Defund the Police? Who do I call? Who's doing it? Who's the guy? Nobody. It's people, but, you know, who do I... Oh, well, we shouldn't do it. Okay, well, call the Central Bureau for not doing it and have something done about it. There isn't one? Oh, okay.
Well, you know,
that's weird.
but what you need there, you know,
Maybe it
people will
doesn't
do what
exist.
they do, and they're allowed to have show chickens, and they could, you know, do whatever they want.
Yes.
But the Democratic politicians have to have a universally clear message so that you don't have people saying, well, you know, I think he really supports it, even though he says he doesn't.
Yeah, well, the
That's a
universal
messaging
message
fail on the
from-
part of the Democrats, not the people who are protesting.
y-
People who
well,
are
yes.
protesting can protest whatever
That
they
I'd
want. They
have
have
to
total
agree
right
with.
to do that. But if you're running as a Democrat, you have to be really clear to the people who you want to vote for you
Yes.
about what this means.
Right.
You
So
know, the same
far,
thing
what
is true
was
of
clear
socialism.
Was some other people need to
If
change
you
what
were
they
running
say.
in Miami,
Yeah.
all right, socialism is a thing. The S word matters. It matters to certain constituencies.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be clear about that. Karen Bass was never going to be a good vice presidential candidate.
Yeah, I forgot that even happened, to be honest.
Well,
but
you know, but
who cares? It
there
still
were people.
didn't mean
Well,
anything.
there are people who do care, and there are people who
Yes.
haven't forgotten.
Well,
and
they're
so
in
when you
this
bring it up and
thing,
say,
but
"Yeah,
they-
but what about Karen Bass? You really do support this? Otherwise, why is her name even circulating?" This
don't know.
stuff matters. You got to be good at this. And you know, when you don't, you lose votes.
I guess.
And to say, okay, well, it's somebody else's problem, not my problem. You're the one that lost the votes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that I'm fine with. I mean, it just so don't get on the conference call and say, other people need to say different things because me.
You can't control what other people say,
Well, that's
but
right,
you can control
Abigail.
what you say.
True.
And he did not
Don't
do
say
a very
that.
good job of explaining that. You know,
I
and so
guess.
you need better slogans. Your slogans have to be better than their slogans. You have to march in lockstep sometimes. I'm sorry it sucks, but you have to if you want to win elections.
Yes, but whose step and when are we going to find out what it's going to be? Who's going to call
Well,
it?
in this case, we're talking about Democratic candidates, and we're talking about the House, and we're talking about if you don't do it, you wind up losing votes here. So
I guess so.
this
I
is
just
what the
don't know
focus
why
group
Abigail
is saying.
Spanberger didn't tell me what
you
to
can
say.
ignore it and make excuses for it, but this is what they're saying. I don't like being lied to about this. I know what you mean. You said defund the police. I'm sorry. We don't want to do that. And you know what? That's probably a majority of the country.
It probably is. And it's discouraging, if only because the idea that now words mean what they mean and you're going to vote for Trump. Are you out of your mind? And the answer is yes, you are. You don't know what you're talking about.
You know, and this is a focus group who wound up voting for Trump. It doesn't mean they're the font of wisdom that everybody has to follow. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, good.
But, you know, this is what we're dealing with is what I'm saying. And so, you know, to face reality, you got to face the fact that these are the voters that you have to convince to vote for you because they're the ones, you know, in marginally close races that are going to decide these races.
What about the notion that these are the people you just have to abandon and outvote, which we did?
Well, if we did, then we would have more people in the House than we do, and we would do better in the Senate than we have.
Well, I guess. I don't know. Well, Biden managed to outvote him.
Biden did. But again, a lot of people separated, as we talked, Biden from like not voting for anybody else.
Right. Well, no one knew who the other people were.
Right.
Too busy ducking everything.
So it's a universally accepted take on Twitter. Our friend Danny Burfoot says activists who are doing the work get to decide the message, but maybe, and hear me out, very liberal activists shouldn't decide the messaging to win over middle-of-the-road voters. We ask an open question on why did you change your mind and various reasons. This is the part that gets frustrating because there's no fix for this. One woman says polls showed Biden was going to win, but she didn't want it to be overwhelming, so she logged a protest vote.
Okay. Oh, right? I've seen that in focus
groups.
Right.
We heard that in 2016. Thought we were over it.
It was a joke. Not. I did it kind of as a joke. You remember that focus group? Oh my God.
Yeah. We ask if these people think democracy is in peril. Now, this is the part that my major takeaway.
Yes.
Right. The frustration is over, you know, the fact that defund the police should even be an issue. But here's the real frustration. We ask if these people think democracy is in peril. Only 40% say yes.
Okay.
One of the women who said yes says, but it would have been bad regardless of who won. Democrats wouldn't have accepted Trump. Now, every participant except two say Trump's behavior post-election is inappropriate. 2 believe there was significant fraud. 2 more believe that there's some but not enough to change the outcome. Every person here thinks Biden will be inaugurated. Everybody thinks the transition of power will be peaceful. That's good.
Yeah.
They don't seem to like Trump's antics, and here's the takeaway, but don't view it as a very big deal. Yeah. And our friend Danny Verfoot says, I think that's been an ongoing problem in opposing Trump. We use language that accurately frames Trump as a crisis, and it probably dings our credibility with people who don't like his behavior but think we're being over the top. If you're a low-information voter, and that's the term, as obnoxious as it is, and you get your news from Fox and Facebook and nowhere else, then you're going to think that talking about him being a dictator and trying to subvert the election, post-election period is over the top. And how do you reach people like that? Because it's accurately portraying what he's doing, but the way you're doing it with hair on fire is just pushing him away. And that's the dilemma. So closing with asking if anybody already regrets their vote for Trump. One woman says she wishes she wouldn't have voted, and 2 say they would change their vote. So I don't know how big the group was. You know, usually these are 12, 14 people. And already, you know, like 8 hours after the election, they were already sorry.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's how people vote sometimes. Sometimes it's like, this is how I'm feeling the moment I get into the booth. I was planning on voting for this one, but then I pulled the lever for that one.
I guess. So,
and he concludes by saying, which I think everybody can agree with, swing voters are really something, y'all.
Yeah, if they are people. How did they conduct? Was this conducted in person?
Yeah, well, I think Zoom. They're doing Zoom stuff now. The stuff I've seen from Frank Lentz and the other focus group, Sarah Longwell. I mean, this is the 3rd or 4th one that I've followed, and they're generally doing it by Zoom.
All right. I mean, honestly,
it's fascinating
like talking
stuff.
to bots.
You know, people are complicated. And there's no one answer to this, but it's good to pay attention to what messages get in and what don't, even if wrongly.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that people accept that there's institutional racism, Black Lives Matter, and the police really ought to be redone in a way that, for example, gets mental health folks in there and de-escalates and even spend money in a different manner so that the police don't get all the money. They're fine with that.
Yeah.
They hate the slogan. Loathe it.
One way of dealing with it.
It's a red flag.
Yeah. One way of dealing, maybe we deal with it the way the Republicans dealt with it in 2016. Highly targeted, dark Facebook advertising that says, I personally am not for defunding the police. I'm for all of these other things instead, despite the fact that other people are saying this thing. And by the way, I also oppose Trump, but he's not so bad. And yada yada. I don't know. I mean, I guess
that actually
way
might
to
be
deal
more
with these
effective.
guys.
These are people who are getting the Democrats are for defunding the police and socialism ads on Facebook.
Right. So why not approach them with,
and they're coming away with the idea that, well, it must be true because like all my friends say so.
Right. I guess so. We can, and this way you can do things. I guess the only way to deal with a person like that is, well, how do we logically advertise to a person like this who thinks two different simultaneously inconsistent things? And the answer is with highly targeted Facebook ads that nobody sane will see, so you don't have to answer for them, but go directly to these idiots. All right, I guess that would be a solution if there is a Facebook next time.
Mm.
But
and you look,
terrible.
You can take the approach, I don't care, nobody cares, we should just outvote them. But, these are gettable votes.
They weren't.
In the end, they weren't. But these are people who decided to switch at the last minute. So, theory they were.
Maybe that's the problem with the polling. They answered yes to Biden right up until the end, and then everybody stopped polling in the last 2 days. And then
that's happened, that happened with Suffolk and USA Today with Romney.
I guess so. But, I don't know. I don't know if these are gettable. I don't know if these guys get anything.
Some of them aren't. Now, the Frank Luntz ones tend to be a lot more conservative. And it's clear that they had no intention of ever voting for Biden. And those focus groups are more like, do I vote at all or do I, stay home? And it looks like they voted in the end.
Well, it's important to research
that's
these
a different
people.
That's a different group than this one.
Yeah. I will agree with one thing. There's one or two things in here that make some sense. And I do believe that there's a lot of people out there saying, the thing that she said about the defund the police. Suddenly words mean what they mean. For this one thing, because it incenses her, or she knows cops, probably is what it is. But then this other part here, the other thing that didn't make any difference, that she skipped over because it doesn't make any difference, which is they ask if people saw the Lady Gaga GOTV performance. Only 4 of them knew even what they were talking about, and the one reaction they got is, I love Lady Gaga, but all of Hollywood supports Biden and Democrats. And then another one says, Lady Gaga is kind of crazy, and I don't think we should listen to her talk about government. She wore a dress made of meat. That, I believe, is where people are on Lady Gaga.
At least she knew who she was.
Yes, right. And it's okay. You know what? That's not entirely insane.
I certainly know her dress.
Not the dress is insane, but to say maybe Lady Gaga is so smart about government.
Yeah, or James Woods.
Maybe. Yeah, right. Any of them, for that matter.
Or Chachi,
Chachi. Oh, yes, right. Okay. I forgot that he was still out there doing that. That I can believe that lots of people are like, celebrities don't mean much
to see if he's still alive.
Who?
The Dilbert guy who thinks that Trump is the great persuader who's absolutely going to win and you all are crazy.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, somebody should probably do a welfare check on that guy.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, well, then
Wellness.
You're right.
Yeah.
I missed the right part on that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
anyway,
that is weird.
That's my segment for today. Got you 45 minutes.
Yes, right. Well, it was well worth the price of admission, certainly. No refunds.
If you are trying to persuade people to agree with you, there is nothing more frustrating than a swing voter, I have to say.
Yes, and even
it's like, I get all of that. I agree with you all
nonsense.
of that, but I'm voting for that other guy. Why? Because, I really like this tie.
Yeah, right.
I just remember, years back, there was some commercial on one of his apprentice shows, and it just made me really feel good. So I basically have good feelings for him. But he's a racist, and he's a fascist, and he put kids in cages. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
But what's the thing that's deciding your vote? Well, this other thing that has like almost nothing to do with anything. Like, I don't like Lady Gaga.
Yeah. Well, okay.
and I don't like the slogan, so I'm not voting for the the other guy. I'm voting for Trump.
That's true. Except it's not his slogan. And
kids in cages. What part about that don't you?
Right.
Well, not my problem.
Well, you're going to put Donald Trump's kids in cages. So what about that? Oh, yep. You're right. You have me there.
So it's always frustrating to read those things, but sometimes.
Yeah, I'll say, holy cow. Well, all these people have the same vote you do. Smart Americans who
See,
read
but in the
things.
end, they agree with you on the issues. That's why I think they're, gettable. Not just because they said they were going to vote for Biden 2 weeks. When you go and you probe them about what they believe, they basically are with you on the issue. 70% of them were. Something wrong with messaging. You didn't get them. You didn't make the sale. So what do we
need? So people like that, in order to persuade them, we need to hire dumber messengers.
Maybe.
So that's what we've been doing wrong the whole time.
That's what you need to do.
This person is a terrific, outstanding messenger. Just amazing. Spot on. Yes, I need someone terrible, dumb, and inconsistent.
Well, I like to think of it.
Look through my book. Oh.
These are real people out there whose votes outnumber mine.
Well, together, yes. Plus the chickens.
And so that's how I'm thinking about them.
I guess so.
Not thinking of them as being dumb, not thinking of them as being illogical,
differently smart.
The fact that all humans are. But the fact of the matter is they got more votes than my one, and therefore it would be really useful to get them to vote the way I do if I want to get stuff done that I want to get done.
Well, okay. You have a team too, and maybe you outnumber them. In fact, you do. He won, Biden. But, okay, It is something to think about, and I don't really know how to approach it. And all I know is my thinking on it has got to get dumber, but don't tell them it's dumb. For them, and my Facebook ad to them is super smart in a very different way.
Yeah, luckily you don't have a radio show or anything that, the information will get taped and sent out to people. He really thinks you're dumb.
Right. Well, no one's sending this out to anybody. You have to come and collect this one for yourself. Right. This is I have a note sent to me over here at the Decision Desk 2020. But I mean, I guess what this is actually a practical suggestion for how to do this is you need to adopt the sort of direct mail level of writing with lots of things in all caps and underlines and things the way you would if you were, unfortunately, if you were marketing to seniors about in the way that they would market like health newsletters or financial investment newsletters. There's a certain segment there.
Hire Tom
Selleck. Okay,
looking into this is This is just like a reverse mortgage.
Yes.
We want you to do this, but we're being honest about it. I would never steer you wrong.
Right. Now I'm thinking of the Sam Watterson SNL fake commercial of the robot insurance. Did you ever see that one?
Look, if that's what you got to do.
But that's a real marketing play. There's a real segment of the marketing profession that knows there are people who respond to some things that highly educated people will reject out of hand as obviously facially done.
I'll just leave you with Hugh Sanders' observation on Twitter when I posted that AP show chicken story. Hugh tells us, even if Earth was being invaded by aliens after the moon exploded, the media would still be writing Trump voter sympathy stories.
This could be true.
Which is true.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It could be true, and then it became true.
Right.
Wow.
Alrighty. So with that, that'll have to, satisfy you until Monday.
Right.
There'll be a lot of stuff to happen. I'm sure there'll be more chaos. We got 69 more days before the chaos stops.
Yeah. Plus,
we'll try to summarize it on Monday, and we'll go from there.
Okay. That's it. I mean,
I saw some good feedback to yesterday's show on various and sundry people who heard it. And because it's such a complex issue, the Latino vote, I hope others will make contributions either on Twitter or to write you and send you the links or otherwise get it known, and we'll cover it.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Thank you, Greg. This was very stimulating. The chickens and everything. Plus these dummies here.
Those are gorgeous birds.
They are. They're more interesting now than the dumb people.
I wonder what kind of sauce you would use to. Never mind. I mean, it's just.
Yes, right.
I don't want to give you the wrong impression about how I think about chickens.
Well, yes, the vegans are very mad with you, but they did vote for Trump because something.
Something.
Yeah.
Alrighty, take care. I'll talk to you on Monday.
Okay, thanks very much, Greg. We'll look forward to that, and I'm sure the world will have turned upside down 5 times before then and now. So, before then and after now. See? Okay. Thank you also for bringing me this terribly disturbing news about this focus group. This really is pretty interesting. But yes, it's true. People are complex and hard to predict and hard to describe because they're all strange in their own ways. The Latine vote is extraordinarily complex. The dumb vote is extraordinarily complex. If any of you are Latine or have some specific insights about their complexities, you're welcome to contribute it. If any of you are dumb and would like to tell us about what it's like to be dumb or know dumb people or how they make their decisions, by all means, you can chime in. I don't know if you're going to be able to top this gang. The lady with the chickens, I'm confusing with this whole thing. She's not in this group, in case you're wondering. And it might not be a dumb thing to raise show chickens. I mean, she clearly gets a kick out of it. The chickens are enjoying it, and she might even be winning some prizes here. It's not that that's a dumb thing, although I am a little puzzled about how she waited until the very last moment on Hurricane Katrina to bring the birds in. Like, it was all over the news, but maybe she's a low information show chicken raising person. And I don't know how, I guess she's a Trump voter. I don't know. I don't know what to make of people like this. And I'm not 100% certain that they're gettable, but there was an actual point earlier in the discussion of the focus group that I think you can extract from the analysis of dumb voters and their dumbness and apply more broadly and across the board. And that is, and we're working on trying to settle this thing, and it's disturbing to watching it play out in the way that it does. But yes, you can also sense my frustration with the debate over whether or not, the emergence of the 3-word maybe slogan, maybe not, defund the police, espoused by I don't know exactly who, driven by I don't know exactly who, but something Abigail Spanberger on a conference call said we got to call the Central Slogan Committee and tell them not to have that slogan. I don't know what to make of this. I mean, her complaint is as nebulous and inchoate as any of the things that she's complaining about being nebulous and inchoate. It doesn't make any sense. But because she's Abigail Spanberger, middle of the roader, and something. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I was going to finish this. I don't dislike Abigail Spanberger. I really don't. But I don't like her a whole lot either, I got to tell you. But I don't live in her district, so it doesn't matter a great deal. But I don't know. For some, maybe it's just the fact that she has that somewhat memorable, odd name that makes me come back to it all the time. But it always seems that when there's somebody complaining about how somebody else is campaigning, Abigail Spanberger makes her way into the conversation. And it's like, well, at what point, Ms. Spanberger, Congresswoman Spanberger, the proper way of addressing her, at what point, Congresswoman, do you just run your own race and say the things that you want? But other people elsewhere are saying things that are bad for me, but they're good for them and their districts, right? The people who could be said, rightly or wrongly, but about whom is being said they embraced the idea or the slogan or whatever it is of defund the police. It's good for them in their districts, right? And the mantra usually is Abigail Spanberger must be able to run her race in her district because she's marginal and da-da-da, and we have to be able to have room for her to run as a moderate because the district is moderate. And so therefore, people who don't have moderate districts and win only when they're strident among their Democratic constituencies must shut up and run as moderates and put themselves in danger so that Abigail Spanberger isn't in danger. And I don't really know why that's a calculation for anyone other than Abigail Spanberger. For her, it makes 100% sense. For everybody else, it might not make any sense at all. And so I don't know. To me, the idea that someone running in Brooklyn says XYZ because in Brooklyn that works. Well, you can't say that because there's nothing physical. There's no physical barrier that prevents your words from leaking into Central Virginia. So don't say those things. But I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, is it not the case that I guess you could certainly argue, are there voters in Brooklyn? There are voters in Brooklyn. I mean, period. But there are voters in Brooklyn who say, I like AOC, But she's a member of the Democratic Party, which means that every once in a while she has to rein herself in because something bad might happen to Abigail Spanberger 4 states down to, where are they? New York, New Jersey. Let's say you go through Delaware, Maryland, then into Virginia. So, okay, it's possible. So anyway, down the road here, Abigail Spanberger is going to have a hard time because the Congresswoman I like has to watch her language because she caucuses with Democrats. It's, why it never works in the other direction. Like, I could be losing votes by moderating my message, maybe, and possibly losing votes simply because I'm moderating my message, period, or possibly because I'm moderating it in favor of Abigail Spanberger, who people don't like here in Brooklyn, let's say. It's certainly possible, but it never gets considered that way. And that's because, well, moderate, middle of the road people just get more attention and a higher value in the media world. And of course, like they say, they're in marginal districts and it could go either way. In which case, you're going to have to, what can I tell you? People who represent the 7th district of Virginia are going to have to be really super astute politicians and have their finger on the pulse of everybody. And they're going to have to be able to know how to talk to people who do or don't know about Lady Gaga and her meat dress. And they might have show chickens and they want to say things like, I hate the way Donald Trump does everything, but I'm going to vote for him anyway because I saved money on fancy coffees and commuting costs during the pandemic. So therefore, when he asks, am I better off than I was 4 years ago, the answer is yes, minus the fact that everybody I know is afraid of getting a deadly disease from going outside. But I'm better off. There's more dollars and more numbers, higher numbers in my bank account. So I don't know. I'm just not sure what to tell you. I'm not terribly convinced by Abigail Spanberger's view of much of anything. But hey, that's neither here nor there. We'll find out what is here and there after this. All right, welcome back to the Abigail Spanberger Show here on Netroots Radio. But we're going to control our messaging from here on. And here's an interesting comment. Eve N, who is on Twitter as Even, get it? Even? Eve N 59. That's 10 short of nice, I guess. I'm not certain what, who knows what numbers mean on anything. But Eve N says, the notion of defunding the police, to me, was a bit of a shock. I bet it was a big shock, too. Until I heard from reliable sources, and they're right, that their budget was on a par with the effing Pentagon and military. Well, certainly, I don't know about the budgeting necessarily, but they do eat up a huge chunk of state and local budgets typically. It's an expensive proposition, to be sure. And there are other parallels to be drawn to the Pentagon and military, too, with all of the surplus military equipment that even tiny police departments get a hold of, and the way, having that equipment drives them to change their approach to policing. There's a very, 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 very serious problem. And there are among the people who still proudly say, yeah, I believe in defunding the police, and who don't even necessarily say, but what I mean by that is there are still different ideas even there. And you know what? In other words, defund the police is a extraordinary complex question with extraordinary complex set of extraordinary complex people who believe it at an extraordinary complex number of different levels. So there is that. But, the problem is we're the side that does nuance and the other one doesn't. And I guess that ultimately is the takeaway from all of this. How do you, I guess everything needs to be workshopped in terms of how will it be viewed by people who don't do nuance, either because they're incapable of it or are unwilling to do it or are culturally predisposed to rejecting nuance as elite and stupid. So that's always worth spending some time on figuring out. All right. Well, let's see. What other... here's another... Karen has this message for us. Abigail Spanberger is a yellow dog show chicken. I get what you mean. And she's a work chicken. We know that. She does know what she's talking about, especially in several areas of her expertise in the intelligence and national security area. She clearly has some political skills. She's survived 2 elections. But again, at some point, I guess your political skills need to be able to help you recognize, I ran for office because I was the kind of person who was well suited for running in a marginal district. And it's always going to be a toss-up for, as far as whether or not Abigail Spanberger survives. It may get easier in the future. I mean, one of the other things that we haven't really factored into the Abigail Spanberger story is she is a, do we say freshman anymore? Do we abandon that as sexist language? She's a first-term member of Congress, and they always have, that's the toughest race there is. Once as an incumbent, anyway. The only thing tougher, of course, is unseating an incumbent as a challenger. That's the most difficult posture from which to approach an election. The second most difficult race you'll ever run is re-election after your first term. You're not quite an incumbent yet. There's still this feeling that especially if your race was close the first time, and if you're in a swing district and you're a swingy candidate, there are people who say, well, it's marginal. I could go either way, and so any little thing could sway people, as we found out in the focus group. It could be something stupid as well. I mean, you got to factor that in. So for one thing, Abigail Spanberger's career, can't be judged one way or the other on this re-election. But by the same token, you also can't say, I know the district and what it will do based on this election, or even this election and the last election. They could both be flukes. They could both have nothing to do with anything. She could go on to win for decades to come with an easy 55% plus of the vote every single time, and and eventually run unopposed at some point. Who even knows? All of this could be true, and she could become a Washington institution. And at the end of her career, looking back, people will have a hard time believing that she was ever on the bubble, and that what got said in Brooklyn could ever have possibly influenced her elections. Or she could be a short timer, and it could just be, it's a swingy district, and it's always going to be difficult, and it doesn't matter whether people say they're for defund the police or for some more nuanced position that takes longer to say, but they say it, and 70% of the people in the focus group understand it but reject it anyway, even though they say they agree with it. Or it could just be, look, there's just no reading a district populated by people like this. It's and the idea that it came down to this one thing, it could be true, but it could also be so random that you'll never find out until after the fact. And you have what good is it to have your finger on the pulse of people who might tell a totally different story from one day to the next? I don't know. It could put you in touch with them and make you the master of the district, and master politician who always knows what people are thinking. Or you could be out of sync one time, or they could be out of sync, or they could be talking out their ass. You don't know. What's the point of trying to read tea leaves that can be so random? The only reason to believe that a focus group like this is worth anything is if you believe that there's some consistency that's readable out of this, and there is something. And unfortunately, like right now, I need to know how to talk to people who are just nonsensical. But there's some hope that you'll be able to predict some of what they're going to be nonsensical about and the ways in which they'll be nonsensical. Because, for instance, I could have told you from 10 miles away that they're not going to be particularly swayed by Lady Gaga. That part makes sense to me. I don't know why that came up, but it did. And that gives me some hope that I might be able to figure out what they're up to. And some hope, I guess, that Abigail Spanberger might be able to tell what they're up to. But I don't know. I just found the whole thing pretty interesting. And also, I guess, some of the other analyses we've done post-election, like, for instance, where the vote is close, as we've said, as we said in 2016, where the vote was close, I guess, in terms of, being close in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, the cards just fall this way versus that way for whatever reason. And Hillary Clinton loses, and everybody then spends the next couple of months and years saying, we can't run races like Hillary Clinton does. It's a huge mistake. We can't be there. It doesn't work. Look what happened. She lost. And Greg reminds us, 80,000 votes go the other way. 80,000 people who don't like Lady Gaga but also make their decisions based on nothing that doesn't make any sense could go the other way. And then she's a genius. And Hillary Clinton ran a brilliant campaign. And what a president. And yeah, the outcome changes these things. So applied to Abigail Spanberger. Why not the outcome of, it's interesting that in speaking on her own behalf, she gets on the conference call and chooses to say, why I almost lost. I almost looked like an idiot because somebody in Brooklyn said defund the police, as opposed to saying, boy, oh boy, am I a political genius. Look how close it was, but I walked the tightrope twice and won. I know what I'm doing. And that, okay. Now you could then use that as a springboard to say, and what I'm doing is saying nobody is allowed to say, defund the police. And I guess that's the basis on which people are saying, yeah, we got to do something about changing this messaging, as opposed to saying, I think you handled it pretty well. I almost lost my race. Yeah, well, you barely almost won the first time. In the same district you're running in, right? Yeah. It's only 2 years later, right? Yeah. And you're running more or less against the same idiot, not the same direct opponent, but, in Donald Trump world, right? Yeah. And the outcome was about the same? Uh-huh. So you're saying that there was terrible damage done by something people were saying in Brooklyn? Is that right? Yes. And it was so horrible that you basically had the 2016 campaign over again, even though nobody was saying that in 2016. I see where you're going with this, so no. I don't know. I don't know what to say. What were the results for Abigail Spanberger in 2016? I now have to look that up. What if I'm wrong? Did she run away with it? I don't know. Abigail Spanberger, takes 25 minutes to type her name. 2016, let's say, results, and see what comes up here. Does Ballotpedia tell me? I hardly ever go around there. This is all the new stuff. Maybe will her Wikipedia page tell me that? I can't tell. All right, well, here's the Abigail Spanberger wins Virginia House race. Vox, November 7th, 2018. Will they have the percentages in there, you think? Abigail Spanberger elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. A Democrat just ousted a Tea Party star. Yes, I remember that. Dave Bratt, who was a one-termer, because that's a dangerous time to run. And so she ran against the Tea Party idiot and unseated him, and they're not going to give me the numbers anywhere, did they? Abigail Spanberger. Who is Abigail Spanberger, and how did she win? Is this next section in Vox, so it's got to be true. I wonder what their analysis of the race was at that point. Yes, right. Okay. Story of the 7th District. Story is largely the story of Richmond's urban sprawl. In 2017, the district was 70% white, 18% African American, 7% Hispanic, Latino, let's say, 5% Asian, growing tech scene, suburban development, things are changing. Parts of this district that didn't vote for Trump in 2016. Where's the answer to this? Nowhere. So Vox, no help to me there. Maybe Ballotpedia will tell me something. I don't know. I always found them to be more or less useless, but I'm just curious about the percentages last time. Here's the 2020 stuff. Yeah. I don't know. Well, dang. Well, there we are. Dave Bratt. Okay, so Abigail Spanberger last time around, running against the Tea Party incumbent, right? 50.3% she wins with to his 48.4%. There was a Libertarian candidate in the mix at that point. 176,000 votes for Spanberger, 169,000 for Bratt. And I guess she won by considerably fewer votes this time. But again, running in a swing district as the one-term incumbent looking for a second term is almost always going to be a rough go of it, and it might not have anything whatsoever to do with defunding police and the people who said it. Just want to throw that one out there as a possibility. But there are plenty of other people who, I guess, report the same things, and I don't know exactly. We haven't run down who they are and who the complaints are. I know Jim Clyburn says it was a terrible slogan, but I didn't see him have any trouble getting reelected. And maybe that has more to do with the fact that he's a longtime incumbent and in the Democratic leadership and was never in any trouble as a result of many, many decades of hard work winning in that district. And what do you know? And if you have that, you can overcome any dumb slogan from any people anywhere. And if you don't have that, you will struggle. And you are just in that time of your career where you will struggle, Abigail, and that's it. And I can't call her Abigail. This is unfair to do this. Congresswoman Spanberger. Okay. I think I'm done yelling at her. And I would say she has equal opportunity to yell at me, but one, she will never hear of this most likely. And two, not really be inclined to react even if she did. And three, I have no time to put her on this show at this point. So on to other stories. But it is gnawing at me because that's what this is what Democrats at the moment are wasting their time fighting with about these things. That's too bad. There are other things we ought to be focusing on. Among them, let's see. Mike Allen makes a big splash today over at Axios with the, I don't know what to call it, story that Donald Trump might be thinking about what to do next, which might mean he finally is coming around to accepting the fact that he's lost. Mike Allen says, sources tell me, on Twitter, sources tell me Trump plans to use vote count rallies, just going to continue to do some rallies, to, quote, wreck Fox so he can start his own paid MAGA channel built from his campaign text message database. And I quote here, he's going to spend a lot of time slamming Fox, which is fine with me. Fantastic and a good idea. And as a matter of fact, Rebecca Romans, our friend from Twitter, Lambs and Beds, who says, if Trump really wants to wreck Fox, all he needs to do is buy it and run it himself. And I think that would pretty much do the trick at this point. But he wouldn't want to pay for it. I think you could probably wreck Fox without buying it, but that's the surest way to get around to doing it. I'm somewhat interested in the article that goes with it, but I think really we got the gist of it. And Axios, they love to get straight to the point and organize their write-ups with little blurbs under bolded subheader headlines. So I guess that really, it's interesting. That draws a lot of people in. They like it as a read. Me, it means there's not going to be any buried nuggets anywhere. I read the headline, I get what's in the Axios thing, and I don't need to click. So, for some people it doesn't work so well. Let's see. Other things of interest. Let's see. This headline caught my eye. Let's spend a minute with this one here from Washington Post. There we go. Slow computer today. There are 3 kinds of lame duck pardons, it is said. This person says, a self-pardon, it is argued herein, isn't one of them. Now, it is, but it shouldn't be, and you can argue your way out of it and past it, and that's a good thing, and that's why we're reading the article, but it's not settled by any means. But let's see what they have to say. Trump thinks he can grant himself clemency. It doesn't work that way, say Stanley Arkin, Karen J. Greenberg, and Michael Paradis. Do I have his pronunciation correct? Hope so. And that's all I can do at this point is hope. As President Trump comes to terms with the fact that he is entering the lame duck phase of his presidency, he'll probably wield the pardon pen with particular gusto. Probably true. Don't lose sight of that. Like presidents before him, he will review the lists of pending requests for pardons from indicted or convicted criminals that await all modern presidents at the end of their terms. The power is vast and unreviewable, and that's the big problem. No category of federal crime is off limits. Trump whose presidency was defined by pushing the limits of executive power, can be expected to break new political and ethical ground. That's a very nice way of putting it. He has already issued high-profile pardons of former Maricopa County, Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Can I pause here for just a second to say, good observation by somebody that I think I actually put aside in pocket because it was such an interesting observation. As we were watching post-election, the protests outside of the vote counting centers in some of the close states, lots of people gathering in protest outside of the vote counting center in Maricopa County and threatening, vaguely to storm the place and stop the count, being held out and away from the doors, of course, by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department. And somebody did point out, 3 years ago, these sheriff's deputies were answered to Joe Arpaio. And who knows what they may or may not have done in terms of protecting the vote counting going on in Maricopa County, Arizona, which ended up being pivotal, as Arizona did. And I think a good point being made there. Local elections matter, right? He was ousted and, of course, then actually also indicted and brought up on charges and then finally pardoned by the idiot president. But good point, a couple of years ago, it's a real live possibility that those sheriff's deputies either aren't posted there or are ordered to get out of the way for 3%er militias to storm the vote counting operation in Maricopa County. I don't know whether he really has it in him to have ordered that when push comes to shove, but maybe. And I wouldn't want to put it, that's one guy I wouldn't want to put it past. Not because I think he's so consistent and readable, but because he's crazy and an idiot. Anyway, where were we? Yes. We've also seen high-profile pardons for other right-wing idiots like Dinesh D'Souza and Alice Marie Johnson, whose case was famously championed by Kim Kardashian. I'm not necessarily lumping in with right-wing idiots, although she's become a little bit of a right-wing idiot as a result. But I mean, who could fail to be a little bit swayed by getting the pardon you need, even out of somebody who you never thought in a million years would give it to you? In the coming days, Trump will probably pardon individuals in circumstances similar to those pardoned by his predecessors in the waning days of their presidencies. Those lame duck pardons have tended to fall into three broad categories, and he might try to grant the most nefarious imaginable pardon. Even though it can't be supported constitutionally, he might try to pardon himself. All right, now the argument. Let's see. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution says, the president, quote, shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. And you know how I love to read that. By the way, yeah, don't tell me I'm wrong. The words say what they say, right? I'm part of the swing voter focus group. Now, it says right here that they can issue pardons except in cases of impeachment. Well, it happens to be the case where he was impeached, and so therefore there's no pardons allowed for him, either prospectively or I would argue retroactively. Everybody who has been granted a pardon to this point is now unpardoned, and they all have to go back to prison. Don't tell me that word doesn't mean what I say it means. It says it right here in black and white. You're trying to complicate things with me. I know these things. I might change my mind at the last minute. Whatever. The Supreme Court has held that this power, pardons, is unreviewable, writing in United States v. Klein that the president's pardon power is granted without limit, and reiterating that Congress can neither limit the effect of his pardon nor exclude from its exercise any class of offenders. Because pardons are a combination of mercy and largesse, they're often issued with abandon when a president is preparing to leave office. That's the conclusion of this paragraph. We'll transition to another thought as soon as I get done with this one. I just have to stop for a second. The Supreme Court has held that this power is unreviewable, writing in a case in which they reviewed the power. Just had to point that out, not because of, it's a logical inconsistency. It means something. Right? Why is it unreviewable? Because a Supreme Court said it was unreviewable. What happens if you get a Supreme Court who says that previous Supreme Court is crazy, be it because they decided Roe v. Wade wrongly, be it because they decided, God help us, Griswold incorrectly. For this matter, I'm not even sure they decided Brown v. Board of Education or Dred Scott. They didn't decide Dred Scott correctly, but maybe they've gotten a bad rap about that one, or Lochner, or whatever else, right? Everybody worries about the various things that a new Supreme Court justice will say was decided incorrectly. And that's because if 5 of them decide that U.S. v. Klein was incorrect, then maybe the pardon power is reviewable. We all run around saying it's not reviewable because we read Supreme Court cases and say, sensible, well argued, and that's the way things go. Precedential value, stare decisis, the idea that settled law remains that way and it's good for the stability, long-term stability, and everything else that goes along with it for America. Largely the case. Occasionally you screw things up, They decided Dred Scott, but that was pretty bad, so we're going to undo that one, or whatever. The power exists. And so to sit there and say, the power is unreviewable. How do you know the power is unreviewable? The Supreme Court said it was unreviewable. Yeah, in a review of the power, they said it was unreviewable. That's a great way to end the case if you don't I don't know what the circumstances of U.S. v. Klein were offhand, but if it's a real conundrum, one fantastic way to get rid of a case, if you're bored with or embarrassed, let's say in this term, we've dismissed 19 cases this term on standing alone, and doing a 20th is going to look stupid. So how about this? The power involved here is unreviewable, and therefore, we're done. Well, but don't you think it's kind of limiting? There are things we want to review later and some other date that the different circumstances, we might say we really need to review this thing. Don't worry about it. We can review it if we need to. Well, but you just said it was unreviewable. Yeah, and later I'll say it's not unreviewable. It's very reviewable. How do I know? I reviewed it last time and I'm reviewing it again. So just throwing that out there. Again, to say the president's pardon power is unreviewable because it was once reviewed and found to be unreviewable is to ignore that you have wandered into quantum con law from Schoolhouse Rock basic everyday AP con law. All right. There are, they mentioned earlier, the 3 categories into which lame duck pardons typically fall. Now back to some of that, although I don't know. I want to get back to the one about where he pardons himself. But here they are. First, there are broad-minded but politically risky and socially important at the same time ones. On his last full day in office, President Gerald Ford pardoned, among others, World War II era figure Tokyo Rose. Why? Earlier in his term, Ford granted a conditional amnesty for Americans who had avoided the Vietnam War era military draft in an effort to foster national healing over one of the most divisive issues of the day. The same high-minded goal motivated Ford's first pardon, issued a month after he took office, to his predecessor. It was Nixon. For all offenses against the United States which he, Richard Nixon, has committed or may have committed or taken part in while president. And that's kind of important. Ford granted this reprieve, he said, because conscience tells me it is my duty not merely to proclaim domestic tranquility, but to use every means that I have to ensure it. Okay. The ensuring of domestic tranquility, important because preamble of the Constitution. Proclaiming domestic tranquility isn't a thing that you can do, and nobody imagined it when they were writing the preamble to the Constitution either. Ensuring domestic tranquility is kind of an active thing that you have to do. You can't just proclaim it the way Trump proclaims I won certain states. But okay, moving on. Then he fell down the stairs a couple times. President Jimmy Carter continued in this vein. As one of his first acts in office, he issued Proclamation 4483, a blanket pardon for Vietnam War era draft evasion. That makes a tremendous amount of sense, much more than Tokyo Rose for whatever reason. More recently, many individuals caught up in the nation's war on drugs have been the beneficiaries of broad-minded lame duck pardons and commutations issued by Presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. running out of time here before the break, but the second category of pardons is shadier. You know what we're talking about here. These are the 11th hour pardons doled out by those to those with the right connections. Clinton's pardon of financier Mark Rich and his partner Pincus Green, who almost no one remembers in all of this, I guess, while Rich lived on the lam from a raft of tax evasion charges, is the signature pardon of this category. We'll be right back with the rest. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on with the pardons, although as I scan every source of stories that I've got, there's so many things. And I feel bad lingering on any one thing, but it seems like such a dumb thing just to do a show of me reading you headlines and saying, go read that article, because you've already done that. That's useless to you. All right, let's see. Second category of pardons that we were on was the Mark Rich type pardons. And that's never been entirely explained beyond, that's just somebody that he knows and maybe has given him a lot of money for his campaigns. And he just threw that one out there because it's the least I can do on my way out the door. Never thinking my wife will run for president in a couple of years. I wonder if he gave that any thought at the time, or whether it was valuable to her too. Who knows? Anyway, it hurt them for quite a long time. And let's see. This category, I guess, as they say here, it's the signature pardon of this shadier category, along with Clinton's pardon of his former Housing and Urban Development Secretary, Henry Cisneros. I guess so. He's just considerably I don't know. That one was considerably less. The whole situation was, I think, considerably less sleazy than the Mark Rich situation. They used the word sleazy in this next sentence, saying, these pardons may appear sleazy and are certainly inconsistent with the spirit of the power, which was described by Alexander Hamilton, who wasn't sleazy at all, in the Federalist number 74 as to ensure exceptions in favor of unfortunate guilt, so that justice in the new republic did not become too sanguinary and cruel. But this king-like prerogative power constitutionally enables a president to be nearly as shameless as desired. Shadier still is the third category, presidents pardoning political cronies who committed crimes related to their presidencies. Clinton's pardon of Susan McDougal, convicted of failing to cooperate with an investigation by independent counsel Kenneth Starr, fits this mold, as does President George H.W. Bush's pardon of 6 former officials involved in the Iran-Contra affair. 6 against 1, whatever. Done with the support of Attorney General William P. Barr, who serves in that role right now. The pardons led independent counsel Lawrence Walsh to say the Iran-Contra cover-up, which has continued for more than 6 years, has now been completed. For Trump, the list of pardon seekers in this category is potentially long. It might include those convicted or suspected of misdeeds associated with his 2016 campaign, those who countenanced Trump's alleged quid pro quo scheme in Ukraine, the subject of his impeachment trial, and those who are suspected of improper dealings in connection with the Trump businesses. The only person Trump can't pardon, this argues, is Trump. But that's not what he thinks, tweeting in 2018, as has been stated by numerous legal scholars. Oh, we got to do this in his voice. I have the absolute right to pardon, in all caps, pardon myself. But why would I do that when I have done nothing wrong? That's a good question. In the meantime, the never-ending witch hunt led by 13 very angry and conflicted Democrats and others continues into the midterms. Remember that? The Constitution, it is argued here, and the nature of what a pardon actually is make this claim of absolute authority legally meaningless. I hope, but I don't know. A presidential pardon is a kind of deed, like the deed to a house. Not just an action, but probably pretty related in the etymology of those terms. But a deed, like a deed to a house, it must be given and received, delivered and accepted. I don't know, man. The president can no more auto-immunize himself from future prosecution than he can sell himself Trump Tower. He's done that, though. Or nominate himself for the Nobel Peace Prize, which he also has done. This is terrible. Without two parties, it is both illogical and illegal. As a 1974 Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel memo put it, and we hate those stupid memos, under the fundamental rule that no one may be a judge in his own case, the president cannot pardon himself. But as we know, those memos don't always hold sway with everyone. And maybe you don't need two parties, and maybe he can sell himself Trump Tower if he sells it to an LLC and then sells it to another LLC, and he's the sole owner of both LLCs. Is he not selling it to himself? I don't know. I think it's a bad example. That does not exclude the possibility, however remote it might seem, that Trump could resign anytime between now and Inauguration Day as part of a corrupt bargain with Vice President Pence. People have theorized this. In that event, Pence would become the 46th president and in exchange could use his newly acquired presidential power to pardon Trump. Historians have looked at the possibility of a similar handshake agreement inside the Nixon administration, but have never established that a deal between Nixon and Ford was made. And by the way, if you are interested in seeing that happen for some reason, I don't think anybody here actually interested in seeing it happen, but except as I told you, it would be a great trolling move, quite honestly, for a number of reasons for Trump and Pence to do this, not the least of which would be to render all of Joe Biden's merchandise that might have been printed up saying that he was the 46th president of the United States. I was going to say rendering it useless, but actually it would make it a collector's item. So let's put a silver lining on this thing. It would become very valuable to have Joe Biden 46 stuff if Pence actually ended up 46th president for a day with the asterisk on there. It would be fun. And I don't know. I'm also curious whether they would change that at all, or whether the Biden people would say, no. Biden's the 46th president. Pence is an asterisk on 45. He's not a real president of the United States. It'd be very interesting. Either way, someone should give me one of those T-shirts for free or something like that, and then I can sell it on eBay when I'm 100. Such a maneuver, however, would be more than a little bit dicey for Trump. For one thing, it would run afoul of the federal bribery statute, which makes it a crime if any public official corruptly demands, seeks, receives, accepts, or agrees to receive or accept anything of value, personally or for any other person or entity, in return for being influenced in the performance of any official act. That's true. It would violate the federal bribery statute, but so has all of the last 4 years, and there's never been any consequence for it, and I don't know why Trump would believe there would be now. But okay, that's the truth, and it's hanging out there, so you say it. Now, while an undoubtedly novel scenario that would keep lawyers and legal analysts employed for years to come, the statute is one of the few public corruption laws that clearly applies to the president, except not until he's out. But then again, I also see people arguing that you also shouldn't indict a non-sitting president because you're going to upset the apple cart, essentially, and the societal damage that you'll do is not worth it. So keep in mind, please, you cannot indict a sitting president, and you also can't indict a president who is no longer sitting. So I guess that means you're supposed to indict. It's very important to indict your presidents early while they're still candidates for president and haven't been elected yet. But then if you did that too close to an election, that would violate the DOJ rules. So really, basically, if you want to get away with crimes, say you're running for president and just always be saying it. All right. A bigger problem, though, for Trump, real one, actually, according to the article, would be that such a deal would not only make Trump look guilty, but would be a tacit admission that he was guilty. This is the two parties to a pardon thing here, right? There is a popular misconception that a pardon is an exoneration. Perhaps that's why Trump granted posthumous pardons to boxer Jack Johnson and suffragist Susan B. Anthony. But a presidential pardon is not an exoneration. At least as far back as 1915, the Supreme Court has articulated that it carries an imputation of guilt and an acceptance of a confession of it. In other words, if you accept the pardon, you acquiesce to your guilt to be free from the legal consequences. But there are still consequences. Trump would have to not only forfeit his pride, but also give the lie to a long record of disclaimers, most recently his assertion that he's been described as the most innocent, honorable man ever to hold the office of president, of course, by himself. For a president who has mused that his likeness should be added to Mount Rushmore, a pardon on his way out the door would bring the very penalty it is meant to erase, a story that future generations would forever know. I don't think that actually sways him, quite honestly. One, he knows he's not going to be put on Mount Rushmore. They don't put one-term, never won the popular vote, impeached idiots on Mount Rushmore. And plus, there's no room anyway, so forget about it. And we shouldn't be carving up the mountain any more than it ever was. But okay, all of that aside, there really is something to the idea, people talk about it all the time. Well, in order for the pardon to work, it means you got to accept the guilt. That's always been the popular conception of it. But look, like I said, Jack Johnson and Susan B. Anthony weren't alive to accept the guilt, but they're pardoned nonetheless. People will say, well, that means you accept that you're guilty and you admit it. And he'll say, no, it doesn't. And no court is going to say, well, he doesn't, so therefore he's not pardoned. So marshals of the Supreme Court, rearrest him. It won't work that way. That's a stupid construct, and you should put no faith in it. I mean, it's part of the thinking about the theory of pardons and what they're supposed to be about. But in reality, if I have one of these certificates, can I walk out the door of the prison? Yes. Does it matter? Are the guards going to stop you and say, now, before I let you go, this does mean that you accept that you're guilty, right? No. Well, then back into prison with you. Turn around. I defy this presidential pardon. It never did work like that. It's never going to work like that. Forget that whole thing. Okay, so that's my analysis of that article. Throw it all in the garbage. Everything that you thought you knew about the law might be untrue anyway to begin with, and certainly can be rendered moot by 5 votes on the Supreme Court, and they've got that now. So, anyway, when we were talking earlier about one of the first cases about the pardon power being reviewable, in this case, I should point out, after all of that discussion about, it's only unreviewable because we say it's unreviewable, and we only say it's unreviewable having reviewed it, so there's an internal disconnect there. So, yes, we can review it again. That all having been said, this court will not be resorting to that. They will say, oh, no, here, look, this precedent says it's unreviewable, therefore we don't have to review it. And it's not an incorrect thing to say that almost all Supreme Courts, liberal, conservative, and in between, generally speaking, they have a very large potential caseload. If there's a way to duck a case that's tough in any way, they'll duck it. That's their job. That's actually like judicial canon. If there's nothing that has to be decided in this thing by us, typically speaking, it's a no. Now, that gets warped around the edges, and more so lately than previously, because now they say, even when there's no controversy really, to be settled, they sometimes will reach down and take a case because I want to crack at this one. And if you've got 4 people who want it along with you, then you get it. So they kind of disregard that thing too. But typically speaking, judicial canon, that if there's a way to avoid making a controversial decision of constitutional law, how outrageous for the Supreme Court to think that this is their job, then we will avoid doing it. But that's a nod to stability. Things are the way they are, and if there's no pressing constitutional issue at stake, then what's the point of inviting controversy? Let's leave it the way it is. And here they would say the outcome we want is that Trump's pardon remains unreviewed because we say it's unreviewable. Because the last time somebody reviewed one of these things, they said, our review is that this is unreviewable. That works for us here right now, and therefore his pardons are unreviewable. When Joe Biden, on his way out after however many terms he decides, we still don't know whether he intends to be a one-termer, run for a second term, whatever. But on the way out the door for Joe Biden, if he were to issue a pardon that would offend what might still be a 6-3 conservative court if we never wrest back control of the Senate, although we all hope that will happen very quickly and maybe even right now. But if it were still a 6-3 conservative court, they would say, you know what might be reviewable? I bet you wouldn't have guessed this, but I think pardons are reviewable. Let's just check that out, shall we? And then we'd be right back where we started. Okay. Just because it happened to catch my attention briefly, but then it went away just as quickly because I don't know what happened. I moved my cursor, and so I lost the thing here. But something Kyle Griffin was just recently tweeting about, and there we go. If I can find it, I'll do the long story short version of this one and share the longer article for you to read. Kyle Griffin reporting here, something out of the New York Times. The U.S. ambassador to Denmark, where things, at least one of them, are rotten, claimed as recently as this past weekend that she was a disenfranchised voter because her absentee ballot was not counted in Pennsylvania. Can you believe that she was a victim of disenfranchisement in Pennsylvania? Because as you know, they were disenfranchising Trump supporters left and right and singling out their ballots somehow, even though the plan was to single out everybody else's ballot and throw them out. But then it turns out that 80% of Pennsylvanians hated Donald Trump. So they switched, and now the disenfranchisement is for Trump supporters. Problematic story. And the problem with this particular problematic story is that a search of Pennsylvania's elections website, like, hey, did this person vote? Was their vote counted? You can actually check that stuff. It says, yeah, her ballot was counted. So there you go. That's the story. The U.S. ambassador to Denmark, completely full of it. And I guess when she goes back to next address the government of Denmark, they will say, weren't you the BS artist who just said that her ballot wasn't counted? But all you have to do, you don't even have to leave your desk. You can look it up on the computer and it's counted. And why didn't you look it up or did you just really want to lie about this? Carla Sands is her name. I guess I might as well read this little blurb to you. U.S. ambassador claimed her absentee ballot was not counted. We found it was, say the folks writing this elections roundup in the New York Times. The U.S. ambassador to Denmark, Carla Sands, claimed as recently as this past weekend that she was a disenfranchised voter. Well, you know the story. A search of Pennsylvania's elections website shows that Ms. Sands' ballot, Ambassador Sands, was counted in the state's Cumberland County, where she spent at least some of her childhood. So, good question about whether she's really supposed to be voting there or not, but, got to vote somewhere. She's in Denmark. The state reported it mailed Ms. Sands her absentee ballot on August 25th. Great day. And that it was accepted after being returned on October 15th, although it is unclear when that information on the website was updated. No one might imagine it was updated either very close to October 15th or at the very least somewhere close to November 3rd, and she just probably didn't look. Here's Carla Sands tweeting about it. I changed my residence to the great state of Pennsylvania, which is a Commonwealth. Earlier this year, I voted absentee for Donald Trump in the same way many members of our military vote, which he's trying to throw out as well, but you didn't know that at the time you wrote it, probably because you're partisan and an idiot. Last night, I checked the Pennsylvania voting records, and they did not count my vote. Hashtag disenfranchised. Wrong. Every legal vote should count, she tweets later on. Please don't disenfranchise me and my fellow voters in order to win at all costs. The world is watching. The legitimacy of the election is at stake. However, at this point, the legitimacy now of the United States' representation in Denmark is at stake, and I guess, we know how that went. We got a sound effect for that one. We no longer have credible representation to the government of Denmark, and now we're not going to be able to conclude that Puerto Rico for Greenland deal. And I don't know if Trump knows about that, but he can blame her for that one. You blew it, Carla. You're out. Anyway, Sands, in case you were wondering, who the F is Carla Sands and how did she get to be ambassador to Denmark and stupid? And the answer is she got to be ambassador to Denmark under the Trump administration because she's so stupid and wealthy. Sands is a former actress, apparently, and a Republican donor who has been President Trump's ambassador to Denmark since late 2017 and has used her personal Twitter account to echo his campaign of casting doubt on the election results. Since last week, she has shared numerous posts from conservative news media, Republican activists, and Mr. Trump and his allies alleging election fraud and improper ballot counting. Her two tweets claiming that her own vote was not counted in Pennsylvania came in the hours just before and after the state was declared won by Mr. Biden, giving him enough projected electoral votes to clinch the presidency. The State Department didn't respond to a request for comment. And let's see, anything else? The New York Times sent press officers screenshots of both of the Sands tweets in the Pennsylvania election website showing that her vote was counted. And that's the end of the blurb. We're just going to have to leave it there. The ambassador to Denmark is a liar. Oh, well. Thank you to Lara Jakes, who put that particular blurb together. All the rest of my internet connections on this computer have gone down in the meantime, but I'll switch over to the other one, which still has Pocket open. And let's see. Getting down to the wire here. What do I need to tell you? All right. Well, let's see. Shall we talk about COVID vaccine protocols or what? Somewhere I put aside the word that you needed these super cold freezers, and I don't see it immediately now. So that's too bad. Yeah, there it is. Stat News. Remember them? The healthcare focused news service. Stat News. We're being left behind is a quote here that's in the headline. Rural hospitals can't afford ultra cold freezers to store the leading COVID-19 vaccine. So that's out there. You know what? I'll give you that to read along with an article that that Gideon sent me from overseas that will give us some clue as to, the rest of the world is going to have to administer this vaccine too. What's happening in the UK and the National Health Services with respect to how they are planning their logistical operations for administering the vaccine. They do have I think nominally functioning government, even though their prime minister is still Boris Johnson. But you should read through this one too. It prompted me, actually before I had gotten it, I was already thinking about this, just sort of trying to work out the math and the logistics. How do you get 331 million people, some of whom are anti-vaxxers, 2 doses or maybe more of this vaccine, and the glass vials we've read about, and how many syringes are there? Do we even have enough? And rubber gloves and people to do how many people could you put to work administering these things? How long does it take to give a person a shot? How many of these doses could you safely administer in a day? Literally, how long is it going to take if people work, let's say 8-hour shifts, just giving people dose after dose after dose? Could this drag us into 2022, just giving people the vaccine, even if it's ready at the start of the next year? A good logistical question, and a good look at what's happening in UK as they begin to confront these issues. We can't, because the competent government that will plan this stuff isn't allowed access to any of the information needed to do the planning. But luckily, they do have Ron Klain, and maybe he'll be able to figure it out with information that he can get people to give him, plus his own knowledge of the situation. But very interesting, and we'll perhaps discuss it a little bit more tomorrow. I feel like there are other things that we definitely have to chuck in here before we close out for the day, even though you can always rely on Justice Putnam to bat clean up for us and get to the really important things that we forgot along the way. There is an update on a new study of the situation on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which will be interesting, and maybe that too can be. I'll share it with you in case we don't get back to it again tomorrow, because there's still enough news to fill more than 2 hours tomorrow. But I always was wondering whether we were ever going to get sort of a final word on what happened there, especially as I watch around the world where the highest concentrations of new cases each day per capita or per million residents are popping up. And Guam, I mean, I believe it appears we've left a mess behind on Guam, and I got to imagine that some of it came from the USS Theodore Roosevelt. I don't know what other source there would be of moving the virus to Guam, but I guess, other military flights in and out, could be anything. But that seems like a high possibility. Josh Marshall tweeting this morning the story of Jared and Ivanka having to, apparently, long story short here, we'll give you the tweet. There is a attached article as well. Jared and Ivanka apparently asked to withdraw their kids, that is, that they were asked, I think, by others, to withdraw their kids from the Jewish day school that they attended in D.C. because parents at the school were concerned that Jared and Ivanka were flouting COVID safety guidelines that the school requires of all of its other parents. It's a community thing here, right? And all the other parents, in order to keep their kids in in-person classes attending the school, the idea was, well, we're a private school and we're a Jewish school at that. We're a more cohesive unit perhaps than many other private schools. Why don't we all just make the promise to ourselves that we will follow these COVID guidelines and therefore keep it as safe as we can for our kids to be in person in school? And everybody's doing it, and they're all watching Jared and Ivanka running around without masks, going to potential super spreader events, going to actual super spreader events. And people must be saying, they can do what they want with themselves, but why are they putting my kids at risk? It's a private school. Kick them out. And so they did. And they're now transferred to another Jewish day school in suburban Maryland. But I guess the same questions will eventually arise there, too. You can't just do all this stuff and float around as though there were no consequences. Unless, of course, you can, in which case, go ahead and do it. That, I think, pretty much, well, we're running up against the time wall here, but let me throw this one out there, too. I mentioned to you the other day the story of the Postal Service worker who said he saw some sort of ballot tampering going on, and then under questioning from U.S. Postal Service inspectors, recanted his testimony. It turns out, one, that he had been given some money, I think directly by Project Veritas and James O'Keefe, but that he also ended up netting another, they said, $130,000. As it turns out, the $130,000 came through a GoFundMe account that was set up for him and quickly filled up by conservative donors. O'Keefe now denies the whole thing and also says, by the way, that GoFundMe found out about the thing and shut the page down, and so therefore the guy won't get any of the $130,000 that was pledged. I don't know whether that's really the case or not, but apparently this has happened several times. And David Kovucci, who's tweets under his name but identifies as Election Dave, David Kovucci, senior politics and tech editor at the Daily Dot, apparently did his own review of this stuff and said yesterday James O'Keefe threatened to sue a Twitter user who accused him of laundering money to sources. But he raises an interesting question because almost every Project Veritas whistleblower eventually launches a GoFundMe at the moment their stories drop. Why is it, they ask in this story, that so many of Project Veritas's right-wing whistleblowers end up landing GoFundMe paydays? Interesting question. He says, O'Keefe, that it's not true, and just like Donald Trump, he's going to sue everybody who says it is true, so therefore we say it's not, or whatever, even if he never finds out about this thing. But Daily Dot found at least 7 whistleblowers who have all had GoFundMes launched simultaneous to their big, quote, interviews with Project Veritas dropping. So it seems like a coordinated operation, but it totally isn't, and I'll sue you if you say it is. So just thought I'd throw that in there for you. Time now to hand things over then to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And as always, Great job lining up stories and knowing what the hell you're going to be doing ahead of time. A skill I absolutely admire and will never be able to replicate. Here's what he's got for you. Let's see. John Adams in the news. How do you like that? He's dead. He was the first president to hand over power peacefully. Is that right? Does that mean that there was some problem with George Washington going on? We'll have to check in on that one. Then, on the rest of the menu, most states are not prepared to distribute Pfizer's finicky COVID-19 vaccine. We'll find out why, and if it has anything to do with more than just the freezers. Oil field operations likely triggered the recent earthquake swarms in California, a few miles away from the San Andreas Fault, just where you don't want it. And the nation's first regional hub for Jetson-like flying cars is being built in Central Florida. I don't know if they have any of the cars, but they're building the damn thing, so I bet you better go get one.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I didn't think about the need for a hub on that one. Now, internationally, Dutch police are investigating after shots were fired at the Saudi embassy in Amsterdam, and Australia will appoint a special investigator to examine possible prosecution of its military for crimes in Afghanistan. Boy, it's everywhere today. Stay tuned to find out all the news.